Hi, my name is Alan Carter. I'm the president and CEO of Cabral Gold. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Ruari McKnight, who's the country manager for Cabral Gold and is based in Brazil, and Willie Hughes, who is our VP Exploration. Cabral Gold is a TSX-Venture listed company. We have an advanced exploration project called Cuiú Cuiú in northern Brazil in the state of Pará. We have two gold deposits already drilled that currently contain around about 1 million ounces of inferred and indicated resources. That resource estimate was last updated in 2018. Since then, we've drilled approximately 25,000 meters, and we are planning to drill another 25,000 meters in the first half of 2022. We currently have 4 rigs operating. Last year in 2021, we made 3 new gold discoveries. And we're looking forward to drilling those new discoveries off in some detail and exploring the numerous other targets within the belt. We have approximately 43 other targets surrounding within about a 5-6 kilometer radius within the 2 main gold deposits. And we're about 20 kilometers to the northwest of G Mining's advanced TZ project, which is anticipating a construction decision in mid-2022.
Alan, thank you. Great introduction. Nice to meet you. We haven't met in the flesh during these COVID times, but here we are over Zoom.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Merlin.
I'm relatively new to Cabral Gold. I worked in Brazil in 2009 to 2010, and I had a look at some of the gold deposits actually on some of those kind of artisanal belts. What's your background and what's your kind of history and introduction to the geology of the area, and kind of how did you pick up the project? I'm sorry to kind of ask this kind of go right back, but I'm just kind of curious as to kind of where it started.
Yeah, I'm a geologist. In fact, we're all geologists. Rory and Willie are both geologists too. I have a PhD in gold. I spent about 13 years of my career working with Rio Tinto and BHP. And given my background, I've spent a lot of time looking at gold exploration projects around the world. And a friend of mine introduced me to the Tapajós, which is an area which Rory knows better than I do, but it's an area in northern Brazil, which is actually the site of the world's largest ever gold rush. And this area during the 1980s, there was about 20 to 30 million ounces of gold extracted from this region, from the streams and rivers in this region. Now that's all placer alluvial gold. And I think the three of us really have been quite obsessed by where all this placer gold is coming from and where it's being eroded from. And we've spent a number of years working together. As a group, as a management team, we've been involved, I think, in 5 gold discoveries in Brazil, 4 or 5 anyway. In fact, Rory put the first mine into production in the whole region, which is called Palito. That's in the same belt as us. So this region is really special, Merlin. And the project that we have, there are about 100 areas during the 1980s where people were washing, informal miners were washing and recovering gold from the streams. And the largest one was a project called Cuiú Cuiú, which is the one we own. So it's got an enormous footprint in terms of its placer gold production. There's about almost 18 square kilometers here of historic placer workings. And as I said, we have numerous targets here. We have, somewhere between 40 and 50 targets that we've identified so far, and 2 gold deposits. And as I said, a number of new discoveries just in the last 12 months. So that's really the background to all this.
How did you focus in on the first 2 deposits, Central and MG? Because those are the ones that you've defined so far. How did you get from a regional scale down to those original resources? Did you drill those out from scratch, or were they underneath placer deposits? Is that your kind of principal targeting mechanism?
One of them's partially under some historic placer workings. Of course, all these workings have overgrown and you cannot really see any rock to speak of, very little rock exposed. So we defined these first 2 deposits with soil sampling, and we've got a number of very good soil anomalies, and Central and MG were 2 of those. And so we drilled underneath those soil anomalies. We've subsequently discovered that actually 70% of our area was covered in relatively recent geologic time by a big lake. And so that has deposited up to 20 meters of mud and sand over about 70% of the area. So that, soil sampling over 70% of this area is not actually effective. But the initial 2 deposits, to answer your question, were discovered by soil sampling.
Oh, interesting. And because in recent news releases, and you've been talking about this oxide dispersion kind of halo above the higher grade structures. Can you just tell me a little bit about the geology of what you've got in the primary, or kind of in the underlying, and kind of the morphology of it? You know, how narrow, how wide is it? It's kind of how prospective it is, and then we can talk about what it looks like, the expression above.
Yeah, all of our host rocks, Merlin, are intrusive rocks, so they range in composition from diorites up to granites, and most of them are dioritic to granodiorite. So they're a series of different intrusive bodies here. There's no volcanic rocks or no sediments. They're Proterozoic age, so they're around about 2 billion years old. The two deposits themselves are what we would term orogenic gold deposits, or mesothermal gold deposits, formed quite deep in the Earth's crust. And the one is the central deposit is a northwest trending zone. It's up to 100 meters wide. It's subvertical. It dips very steeply, we think, to the northeast. And the other one is an east-west trending body called MG, which is 5 kilometers to the southwest. It's different trend, but basically very, very similar in terms of the host rocks and the alteration. That body is a little bit narrower, 30 to 50 meters wide in general terms. About both these bodies in excess of 1 kilometer long and are still open. They're open at depth as well. Now, one thing about these types of deposits, as you will know, Merlin, being a geologist, is orogenic gold deposits can go very, very deep. And so we don't know how deep these things extend. We've drilled them to about 350 meters deep. The oxide blankets that you mentioned are flat-lying zones in the unconsolidated oxidized material. So a lot of that lake bed material that I was talking about, the sand and the mud up to 20 meters, that a lot of that is actually mineralized. And so both of these deposits have been eroding. As I said, the primary deposits in the granite over millions of years have been eroding, and they've formed these sort of flat-lying bodies in the unconsolidated mud, sand, and soil. And so we have two new oxide deposits sitting on top of the two primary deposits. In fact, it looks like we have we may have 3 oxide deposits. These things have been eroded, and they were formed by erosion over millions of years. So.
Thank you, and I'm beginning to get a picture of things. So just going back to the intrusion-related kind of orogenic primary mineralization. The grades around kind of 1 to 1.5 grams a ton, kind of, it's from the 2018 resource estimate. Is that?
Yeah, the two primary deposits, the resource estimate of 2018 is very interesting because we had an engineering firm do the resource estimate. And as you may know, when an engineering firm gets all your drill data for these resource estimates, they actually do a statistical analysis on all the drill results. And commonly with gold deposits, what happens is the engineers will put a top cut, and that is a sort of a maximum grade, if you like. So your grades in above that top cut level are all sort of dumbed down towards the top cut. Why is that done? Well, it's done because frequently the higher grades, you don't have a lot of them, and they're regarded as statistical outliers. Now, normally that top cutting process will result in perhaps the loss of about 5 or 10% of the gold that you've got as indicated by your actual drill results. Now, in our case, when that resource estimate was done, we lost about 1/3 of the gold. So we had a lot of high grade results. I'll give you an example. For example, one of the zones within the MG gold deposit, we had a drill hole there that cut 2.5 meters at 55 grams. For the purpose of the resource estimate, that became 2.5 meters at 2 grams. So back in 2018, there was there was an awful lot of high-grade gold that we drilled and we got the results on. We know is there that didn't make it in the resource estimate. In fact, there's 500,000 ounces that's not included in the resource estimate. And obviously since then we've done an awful lot more drilling as well. So these things are growing. We're making new discoveries all the time, and this is a really district scale opportunity, Merlin. There are multiple deposits here. Ruari and Willie have done an excellent job in identifying all these targets and getting all the rigs turning. And so we're looking forward to a very exciting year ahead. As I said, we've got 4 rigs turning right now, so there's a lot going on.
Just on those high grade structures, are they? Because rather than just kind of bulking all of your drill data into some one kind of ore block, kind of 100 meters wide, can you map these structures with kind of geological continuity within these? Let's call them a structural corridor, which is your main zone. Are you going to be able to model down to the granularity that's going to be able to give you the confidence to include the higher grades on geological grounds, even though they're on a pure kind of bulk statistical model, you might want to exclude them?
Yeah, it certainly looks like we'll be able to do that. And we've been drilling, doing a lot of infill detailed drilling, targeting these high grade zones. And there is continuity in several of these zones, both down dip and along strike. So that is a key thing. I mean, to be fair to the engineers back in 2018, they did not have separate wireframe models for the higher grade vein zones within both deposits. So that is a key objective of the current drill program.
To put the wireframes on, so you're going to get a tighter geological model from which they'll be able to do let's call it a fairer or a more accurate resource estimate.
Yeah, we'll be able to model both the low-grade envelopes and also the higher-grade zones within those envelopes. As I said, the central deposit is up to 100 meters wide, and in some parts of it, it has 2-3 sort of separate high-grade veins that you can actually trace. So, as I said, that is a key objective of the current drill program.
From the edges of your structural zone, 30 to 50 meters at MG, 100 meters at central, is it a kind of a sharp cutoff? Does the grade just kind of fall away from the edges, or is there a kind of a halo around your structure as well?
I'll pass that one to Willie. Willie, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, depends on the deposit. Moreira Gomez is more sharp, and Central, I mean, the thing is, you need to understand that the 2018 resource was done based on all the Mazeline drilling, which was the first company that drilled that. And we, at the time, which I was involved also with working with Alan at Mazeline, we did quite a wide Spaceman drilling, right? We wanted to build, we were just trying to understand the deposit. So most of this drilling were over 150 meter Spaceman. So now we are infilling those. We started Central by the last quarter of last year, and we are drilling now. And in Moreira Gomez, we did quite an interesting infill holes every 50 meters. So now we are getting to understand much more. In fact, Moreira Gomez, at the beginning, we thought it was vertical deep into the south, and now we know it's definitely deep into the north. So the model will change radically. In terms of if it is sharp, as I say, Moreira Gomez is sharp. Central, we're not quite sure. I think there is a halo of very low grade. And I think with the program we set up now, by mid this year, we'll have a much, much better idea. And the other thing is, if you understand how this, at the Magellan time, we had no idea that this blanket existed, because we stepped out and we drill through the saprolite or the oxide into deeper in the hard rock, looking for the deposit. So we had very, very little drilling on the oxide on top of the deposit. So that was Cabral found out this late year, and so we have many more drilling on the oxide, and very, very well defined this blanket, especially Moreira Gomez. We expect to find another blanket in Central, and we have definitely another blanket in Pau de Merenda, which we have a lot of expectation in this target.
I think the other thing to add to that, Merlin, is that these oxide blankets, most of this material was assumed to be sterile waste back in 2018. So material that would have to sort of strip off and pile up somewhere, and there'd be obviously a cost for moving that waste. We now know, as Willie just explained to you, that it's all mineralized, and obviously because it's unconsolidated, there'll be very little drilling and blasting required, if any, and very little sort of grinding, if any, or crushing. So both the mining and the processing cost of this oxide material, and there seems to be quite a lot of it, the cost should be very low.
Before we get onto the oxides, and we will get there, I'm just going to keep plugging away just for my own understanding of the primary mineralization. Obviously, if you've got a width of 100 meters, you'll be able to pull down a pit to a certain depth. I mean, it feels to me that the grades of this, unless you're going to go onto a discrete, unique, kind of small scale, high grade structure to kind of chase it further down, effectively, you're looking at these are open pittable ounces. So you'll be wanting to drill down to, I don't know what the pits will pull down to, but you'll probably be drilling off to 300 meters and probably not much further. How?
Yeah, that's right.
How kind of far in that process are you in terms of drilling out the three main PDM, MG, and central down to the depth that you want to, and the kind of the drill spacing that you want to? Is that all going to be covered in the next round of drilling? The next, is it 20,000 meters? You've got? Yeah,
it certainly will be at the two known deposits at Central and MG. We started drilling all this infill drilling at MG last year, so we've got quite a lot of holes into the primary deposit at MG now, and so we'll have a much more accurate. We've got a much more accurate picture of the deposit in terms of the geology and the limits to the thing, as Willie explained. Central, the infill drilling just started in November, so we're a little bit behind. We've got quite a lot of holes in it, historic holes into Central, but we've got more work to do at Central, so there'll be a lot of drilling done at Central over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. PDM, not as advanced. PDM is not a deposit yet. It certainly is a discovery. We discovered an oxide blanket at PDM. This is just 2.5 kilometers to the northwest of Central, and now it looks like we're onto the primary deposit, which we've only just discovered. In fact, we announced that we were just starting to drill underneath this oxide cap or oxide blanket in the fourth quarter of last year, and we got the first drill results back in mid-December. Well, that's just about a month ago. In fact, the 15th of December, we put the initial 4 holes underneath the PDM blanket in the primary that are obviously looking for the primary deposit underneath the in the granite underneath that blanket, and the 4th hole came back with 22 meters, just over 22 meters, at almost 5 grams, 4.8 grams. So we've made a new discovery at PDM, but it's not as advanced as Central and MG.
That's a fantastic result for a 4th hole.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you consider that we've got, another sort of 8 or 9 targets with some fantastic grades, and this is all outside. So this is outside. These numbers I'm going to quote you now are several kilometers outside of the MG deposit, the Central deposit, and the new PDM discovery. We've got 39 meters at 5.3 grams at a target called Mashishi. That's 500 meters away north of MG. We got 27 meters at 6.9 grams, 500 meters to the southeast of Central, just sitting out there. And we've not done any follow-up drilling on that. We've got 39 meters at 5.1 at Jerrymoon Seema. We've done nothing on that to speak of, just a few. I mean, it really is a tremendously exciting project when you look at the number and the quality of all these targets we've got, Merlin. There's a lot of areas, a lot of different targets with some very good drill results in them that need more work.
Now, if I was with a kind of completely blank canvas and with no constraints on land access or geography, and if you were just on a flat surface and you could just drive your drill truck up to these targets, they're very tempting. What you would probably do is put a couple of holes on, twin your old one, and then do a couple of fences out to the east and along strike, and then you'd have a look. And with you said you've had 5 rigs. I know you've had 5 rigs.
We had 5 rigs last year, but it's the rainy season, so we've let the big rig go. It's not so easy to move a 25-ton piece of equipment around in the rainy season. So we're currently drilling with 4, but Ruari is hot on the trail of another small portable rig. So we're hoping to move that up to 5 in the not too distant future.
But let's say you wanted to put 3 fences across each of those 3 or 4 outstanding kind of regional plays that you talked about. Why didn't you do that last year, and what were the constraints? Because I'm sure there are constraints. And B, are you going to do them this year, and how are those constraints going in terms of environment, in terms of land access, in terms of drill rigs? Just can you talk me a little bit through about the process of testing some of these kind of fantastic regional targets?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously with 50 different targets, you can't be working on all these things at the same time. Obviously, it's a little bit more difficult to move around in the rainy season, although it's raining right now and we're drilling with 4 rigs. We drilled last year through the rainy season, and, it slows you down a little bit in terms of moves, but you can do it. The issue, I suppose, really is where do you prioritize your drilling meters and your dollars? And so that is a constantly changing thing. Besides the infill drilling that we're talking about, that we've just been discussing at MG, at Central, and this new discovery at PDM, we are testing a number of these regional targets, but we're not going to be able to test them all. We've got some good drill results. A number of those are planned for drilling this year, which maybe Ruari can say a few words about some of the targets we plan to test regionally this year. But Roy, care to elaborate on that?
We've also got restrictions in terms of timing on some of the tenements. So there's a large tenement to the north and to the south of the two main mining applications, which we need to do the minimum amount of work before March and April next year, not 2023. So we benefited with basically a hiatus on all the expiry dates on a lot of these targets, these areas which contain these targets, with the mining department because of COVID. But now we have to actually set aside some of our resources to put together a preliminary resource on each of those target areas. So we do have a lot to do. I mean, it's a large area, and as Alan points out, it's all a matter of priorities. Where can we be? We can't be ever at the same time, unfortunately, but we could put a number of rigs on this without any problems with enough targets.
I'm just going to say, this is some of these targets. I mean, look, what you're looking at now this is a magnetic map. All these white spidery lines are the areas where gold was produced from the stream. So this is where all the placer deposits were. You're looking at the rainbow colors in the background, the magnetic. So magnetic data here is very important. But in terms of targets, all these yellow dots are different targets. Now here we've just picked out ones where we've got very high grades in surface float. I've got another version of this map that shows actually targets which we've drilled with some, where we've got actually drill results on. Some of these targets are really fantastic. I mean, this Trakajar one, which we're going to be drilling this year, the surface float here, and it is only float boulders on surface, are averaging 74 grams a ton.
Yeah.
This one's even higher. There are some stunning things, different targets here. So there's quite a lot going on.
Thank you. No, that's really useful. So clearly, you've got the competing priorities. You've got to drill out the primary. You've got to drill out the oxides, and you've got to show scale and potential on the region. So I understand you're dealing with a bunch of priorities. What's two really quick questions, kind of interim questions. One is, what's your assay turnaround time like? And secondly, what's the topography like and the vegetation access? I mean, is it secondary jungle, and kind of how easy is it for you to get in and move around on the ground?
Assay turnaround time right now is around about 4 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, sometimes it's a little bit faster. Obviously, it's been impacted somewhat by the COVID situation, and probably will be impacted by COVID for the next few months. In terms of how easy this is to get around, this is sort of rolling topography. We're not high up in the Andes Mountains or anything like that. It's rolling. The maximum top difference in topographic elevation is between 80 and 100 meters. So some of this area is forested, some of it is subsistence farming. There are dirt roads running all over this area, so it's quite easy to get around. There's a community here. There's a small little village left over from the gold rush days that was founded during the gold rush about 40 years ago. So there's about 400 people live there. So we have a camp in there, and that's where we base ourselves. So.
Is it subsistence farming and gold panning? Is that still very much a thing in the area? Is there a kind of a culture of gold panning?
Yeah, there is, but obviously not on the same sort of scale that it was during the gold rush times of the 1980s. Then back then there were an estimated 20,000 people at Cuiú Cuiú. I certainly wasn't around back then. I never heard of Cuiú Cuiú, but that's what the government tells us. Now, right now, there's probably between 50 and 60 individual people working in the whole area. So there's still, most of the easy placer gold here, Martin, has been, Merlin has been exploited. So there is still a little bit of that. That's very common. In fact, most of these areas still have a few people working the remnant alluvial material.
Just one comment to add to that, Merlin, is the accessibility. Obviously it's a challenge. It's Amazon. When it rains a lot, makes logistics difficult. But we've chosen specifically the Energold rigs, which are man-portable rigs, which you can actually transport in right through the winter. And the platform size is the size of a small office, not very big at all, 5 by 6 meters or so. And they can be brought in a modular format. So the diamond drilling we can do anywhere, all through the year. Our little RC rig's it's track mounted, rubber track mounted. It's adapted very well. We get a lot of access. We've got a fleet of heavy equipment to help in the logistics. The larger rig, the RC rig Alan mentioned previously, that was a problem. In the summer it was fine, but in the winter you'd just be banging your head against the wall. So we're keeping a fleet of drilling equipment which is very flexible and easy to move around.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're using man-portable rigs in Ecuador as well. I mean, some of the vegetation is quite thick, and it's good to be able to get it in and out. So let's talk about the oxides. Some of it you said is in lake sediments. You've got kind of 20 meters of lake sediments, but I've seen you've also got other areas where you've got 50, 60 meters of oxide depth. So it's clearly a mix of different materials. Are you drilling these with angle holes to pick up any kind of vertical components?
We're drilling. We've drilled the oxides mainly with RC holes, and a lot of that drilling has been. Some of it's been vertical, some of it's been angled. Merlin. So look, maybe what I'll do is I'll just pull up right now a typical cross section. This is a cross section through the MG deposit to give you some sort of idea of the oxide deposit here. So look, what you're looking at here on the left, what you're looking at with this sort of coloured blob, the blue and the red, that is the actual. This is a map view of the horizontal extent of the blanket. Now, these lines going through the middle of the deposit is the primary deposit which underlies it. Now, the redder zones within this blanket here are obviously higher grade. So there was higher grades actually sit on top, no surprise, of the primary deposit. And if you look at a section through it, if you look at a section through it, here's the primary deposit here, sitting in the pink granitic rocks, the fresh rocks. All this material up here above this dashed line is basically this blanket material. And as you might expect, the grades are better and the oxide blanket material is thicker, where, immediately in the vicinity of where the underlying deposit comes through. So this particular hole that I'm pointing to now, that the blanket there, that's 60 meters. That's an angle hole, but it's 60 meters at 3.5 grams a ton. That's a bit atypical. That is, we do have, obviously the better grades are closest to where this underlying deposit comes through, but 30 meters at half a gram, 28 meters at half a gram. These are very good numbers for oxide material. It is a laterally quite extensive blanket area. We think the blanket at MG is now about 40 hectares in size, and it's still open. In fact, down here towards the southeast, we just reported last week, we're starting to get indications that there could be more of this oxide material outside of the current limits of that blanket.
Thank you. And can you just talk through the kind of the heat map on that? So that's a nice little plot, the gram meter. So
basically this is very simple. It's grams gold. So these are all drill results which Willie has summarized here. It's grams per ton gold times meters. And so all you're doing is you're summing what your grade is by the number of meters you've got. And so obviously the thicker and higher grade portions of the deposit are in the center here, immediately overlying this the primary deposit, which, as I said, are these sort of east-west trending lines, which is obviously these primary zones coming through here. So
that bottom figure there, that on the scale, 80% is greater than 11.8. So let's call that 12 for my maths. So that could be 30 meters at 0.3 grams gold.
Correct. Or 12 meters at 1 gram a ton, or 24 meters at half a gram a ton. Now, the other thing is, we don't obviously have a resource on this blanket material or on any of these blanket deposits yet, but we've got a lot more work to do. Now, the interesting thing is that because this material is going to be so low cost to mine and process, the actual cutoff grade, not the top cut, the actual cutoff. So that's the minimum grade that you would mine for this type of blanket material is obviously going to be much, much lower than the hard rock material. So we anticipate, well, we don't yet know, but we think a sort of a good rule of thumb here for the actual bottom, the cutoff for the oxide material, it's probably going to be in the order of about 0.1 grams a ton.
Yeah, I remember.
Much lower than the hard rock.
I remember when I was working in Brazil being amazed at Muro d'Oro, which was their old Rio Tinto, which is now Paracatu, and that was the average grade was 0.4 grams a ton. And I was thinking to myself, crikey. And it's all about the processing cost and the mining cost, free dig, easy processing. Yeah,
and that's Brazil's biggest gold mine. I mean, most people, retail investors that I know, they wouldn't get too excited about 0.3 grams a ton or a third of a gram a ton. Well, Brazil's biggest gold mine, which is owned 100% by Kinross, and it is Kinross's biggest gold mine, Brazil's biggest gold mine as well. The average grade there is about a third of a gram, as you just mentioned. And it's tens and tens of millions of ounces. They've got about 25 million ounces of resources. Now, everybody these days is looking for high grade and chasing high grade drill intercepts, but there are massive amounts of money to be made with lower grade deposits if they are sitting on surface and they are very easy and cheap to mine and process.
If you're going to look at these oxide deposits, and you've got two obvious processing routes, one is heap leach, one is CIL, and a bit of gravity than CIL. To go down the heap leach route, you need to know that it's going to behave sensibly on a pad. You know that you can't have too much.
Correct.
Clays can be a problem.
Yes.
You might need agglomeration. You might need flocculants, whatever it is. You just you've got to understand the metallurgy of your oxide, but not just kind of the behavior of the gold, but also kind of flow rates and that whole shebang.
Correct.
How are you getting on in that process? I know you've done some smaller bulk samples, but I don't think you've done trial mining. Talk to me about that, please.
Okay, so look, you correctly point out that with this oxide material, understanding the metallurgy is absolutely key. Can this material be processed via heap leach? That's one potential, because if it can, the processing costs here will be very, very cheap. If not, it's probably be a combination of and/or gravity processing and CIL, which is still pretty cheap, but not as cheap as heap leach. We drilled 5 diamond holes last year specifically for the metallurgical test work, and Ruari and Willie have done a cracking job of actually getting those samples organized. And there's about just under half a ton of material at Caps Cassidy, which is a well-known metallurgical laboratory in Nevada. So those materials are being processed. We will know how amenable this material will be to heap leach. We expect to get preliminary results in March. Final results will probably take a little bit longer, but we'll get some sort of idea in March on that material. And then, based on that, once we know how amenable this material is and what the processing route is, we'll then look at completing a scoping study here, probably quite quickly after that. Probably, during the third quarter of this year.
How claggy does it feel? Does it when you look at it, does it feel pretty claggy?
Oh, clay.
No, I did say claggy.
Yeah, right. It's just a combination of some of it's more clay rich, some of it's soil, some of it's sand. I mean, it's how much of that we don't yet know. It's a little bit early to tell, but it's not all uniform material, that's for sure.
Great. Well, yeah, and I mean, I know. I mean, just look at Iron Fury, and that was a great little heap leach plant built by heap leach mine built by Clough for a couple of $100,000, and it chucked out 50,000 ounces of gold for 10 years. It was just fantastic. But so the returns on the heap leach, it can be phenomenal. So absolutely, fingers crossed, and keep an eye out for that. Good.
Yeah, so, I mean, look. I think you're involved in a junior exploration company. We've all been working in the junior side of companies for quite some time. The real challenge with junior exploration, junior mining, is dilution and mitigating the dilutionary effect on your capital structure. We have a very exciting gold project. There's obviously a whole series of gold deposits here in close proximity. We have 2 defined right now. We've made a series of recent discoveries. The real challenge here, Merlin, is how do you actually realize the potential of this property, and how do you get to a point where you know how much gold you have and how many gold deposits you have, without sort of completely blowing out the capital structure, without continually financing drilling, diluting, financing, drilling, diluting. So we have an opportunity with this oxide material to break that cycle. And rather than keep going back to the market and diluting our capital structure, we're going to be looking very hard this year about going into it with a small little, perhaps heap leach operation or a gravity plant or something like that, as a means to generating some cash to actually to actually potentially become self-funding. So that's quite exciting. There aren't many companies that have that opportunity, but we do.
Yeah, no, really exciting. Now, you had a fantastic, on the capital markets, you had a fantastic 2020, but it's been difficult in 2021. That's been a wider market thing for precious metals. Now, I firmly believe that this is going to be a great year for precious metals as real interest rates are negative and inflation bites. But in terms of the things that you can control, in terms of the catalysts that you're bringing, what are your... We've spoken about the kind of metallurgical results, March, April, end of Q1. What are your other kind of milestones for 2022 that you can see kind of in the year ahead, or even the 6 months?
Yeah, well, I think, with 4 rigs running, it's obviously generating a massive amount of drill results. So a lot of that drilling is infill drilling, and some of it is testing some of these regional targets. So, each set of drill results is a potential catalyst. It has been a very difficult market, particularly in the last sort of 12 months or so. We share your optimism regarding this year. But drill results, obviously the metallurgical work that I mentioned, with the preliminary results in March and probably the final results in the middle of the second quarter, is obviously a major catalyst. Beyond that, scoping study on the oxide material. Further towards the end of this year, we hope to be in a position to update the global resource estimate for the whole district. And this obviously will consist of multiple deposits, the oxide material, the new discovery at PDM, the primary discovery at PDM, Mashishi. We haven't talked about Mashishi. That's a discovery from 18 months ago, another primary zone that we're planning more drilling on. So I think those are the main things to look for this year. Ruari's working very hard on the permitting side too. So we're expecting to make some significant advances this year on permitting too. So I think it'll be another exciting year. Last year we had a cracking year in terms of technical success. It was just unfortunate that the market was a little bit sort of negative and the stock didn't respond. But hopefully this year it will.
Well, I mean, in terms of technical delivery of what you're looking to deliver this year, I mean, it's extraordinary because you're hitting the exploration growth, you're hitting the resource re-rating, and you've got the scoping study as well. So, I mean, I wish you every luck and good fortune with it. It's been a strange market. Do you feel that Brazil has changed in people's minds, with the Sibanye takeover of the Appian portfolio, with G mining earlier in the year? I mean, do you think it's very much on people's radar screens now, Brazil? I mean, when you're marketing it internationally, what do people say to you? Do they kind of give a shrug when it's Brazil, or do they say, no, we're with you?
I think perceptions about Brazil and the opportunity in Brazil are sort of changing. And they're changing because there's been quite a few positive developments in terms of changes to the mining law and the permitting process that have made Brazil a more attractive place to invest for foreign companies who want to invest in the resource sector. I mean, I think, you mentioned G mining, but let's not forget, I mentioned Kinross. But there are some big companies that are actively mining for gold in Brazil. Equinox, one of the fastest growing gold producers right now, has 4 mines in Brazil. You've got AngloGold Ashanti, which has 2 big mining complexes in Brazil. They're very active there. You've got Yamana. They've got the Jacobina deposit. You've got London Mining. That's got Chapada. So, there's a whole sort of series of smaller companies, some of them mining like Great Panther, Jaguar Mining, et cetera, et cetera. It is a very dynamic place to work in, because the geology here is just amazing. It's still virtually unexplored terrain. There is a lot of major new discoveries going to come out of Brazil in the next 10 to 20 years. And I think we're going to be at the forefront of that. You know, we as a team have been fortunate enough to be involved in a number of gold discoveries in Brazil. And we think we're optimistic we'll be lucky enough to be involved in a number more. But yeah, we've always believed in the potential of the country. It's a place here that you can work 12 months of the year. You know, the Brazilian real right now has devalued somewhat against most of the major currencies. And so you get more bang for your buck when investing in Brazil. Things are, you know, relatively cheaper than they were just 12 months ago if you're bringing dollars into the country. So, and it's got a skilled workforce. So, you know, this isn't somewhere where there's a news hiatus and winter sets in and everything's frozen and you can't do any drill work or do anything for 6 months. Brazil's not like that. This, you know, the area we work, crops grow 12 months of the year. Everything grows all the time. So, you know, it's a very, very interesting place to work. And let's not forget that, as you know, as a geologist, that several 100 million years ago, this part of the world was stuck next to West Africa. West Africa obviously is very prolific in terms of its gold endowment and the number of very big gold mines in West Africa. And indeed, you know, there are a lot of gold mines, big gold mines in Brazil and other parts of northeast, South American continent. So, you know, we're optimistic there'll be a number of more discoveries will be made here.
Alan, Willie, Ruari, thank you so much. It's been a really good update. I certainly feel as if I've got a much better understanding now of the kind of the technical side of the company. I look forward to seeing how your updates come through during the year. There's nothing quite like landing on a flight at Guarulhos Airport and just hearing that Brazilian Portuguese being spoken. You just think, right, I'm back home. It feels so good. It's an extraordinary country, and what you've done in the last 12 months is great. And I look forward to seeing how you get on over the next 12 months. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Merlin.